I think that there are very few books about your 20s that actually understand what your 20s are like. I'm not talking about what they're supposed to look on Instagram, not the version where you are supposed to get promoted, travel the world, be very successful, find a relationship that is going to last you a lifetime, and have amazing friendships. We all know none of our 20s turned out to be like that. I know for a fact my 20s were not like that. So the book that I'm going to talk about today talks about the actual version of your 20s, where you can be incredibly confident and still be insecure at work, where you might be surrounded by a lot of people and still feel lonely, where one week you are pretty sure that you have figured everything out around you and you are this confident person who seem to have their life together, while the next week you are crying over someone who do not even deserve that kind of emotional energy from you. And that is what made Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alderton so interesting to me, because it's not really a book about finding love. It is a book about what happens when you spend your 20s looking for love in someone else and eventually realizes you have been learning to love yourself and the people around you the entire time. And to me, that is a much more interesting premise. So today we are going to talk about the plot, or really the real life story, then the writing, what I liked about the book, what I did not like about the book, and what is my final verdict of this very popular book by this very popular author. Let's talk about the plot of the book first. Everything I Know About Love is about Dolly's 20s. And because it's a memoir, this isn't a book that has a traditional plot, a beginning, a middle, and the end. Instead, we essentially watch Dolly grow up. We see her teenage years, her friendships, her moving into adulthood, her career, her dating life, her night out, relationship, breakups, alcohol, party, and all of the little decisions that seems very insignificant when you are making them. It somehow becomes the story you tell about your 20s later. And one thing that I liked or found it interesting about the book, that Dolly doesn't present these experiences as some new, funky coming of age story. She's not saying I was immature, I didn't know what I was doing, but now I understand everything. It is much messier than that. She makes these mistakes repeatedly. She recognizes patterns and yet she repeats them. She knows intellectually that she shouldn't be defining her worth through other people's opinion of her, and yet she couldn't steer away from that behavior or that tendency, because that is how growing up actually works. You can understand that someone isn't good for you and still want them. You can know that you're neglecting yourself and still do it. You can recognize that you are putting too much attention to a relationship and still do it. And I really think Dolly is very honest about this contradiction. But the real emotional arc of the book isn't her relationships, it is her friendship. In particular, her relationship with Farley becomes the emotional anchor of the memoir. And that is where I think the title of the book becomes slightly ironic. We go into this book thinking that we're going to read about what Dolly knows about love. But in the end, the most interesting question becomes, what if we have been defining love narrowly this entire time? If we talk about the writing of the book, Dolly's writing is probably the thing that made this book so popular. She has a very distinctive voice. It is conversational, it is funny, it is self-depreciating, but it is a voice of its own. She just doesn't tell you that she had a bad date. She also takes you through the ridiculous details of it all. And that's important because memoirs can very quickly become self-indulgent. You are reading about someone else's life, but the question always becomes, why should I care about this person's life so much? Dolly's answer is really simple, because you probably have been in this person's shoes as well. Her writing takes very ordinary experiences like getting drunk with friends, obsessing over a guy, having a terrible breakup, feeling jealous of someone else's life, and makes all of these experiences emotionally recognizable. And there's also something quite clever about the way she talks about her younger self. She doesn't completely distances herself from that person. She doesn't necessarily makes fun of a younger Dolly from a superior position. There is embarrassment, obviously, but there is also affection. And that is what I feel makes a memoir have a very mature take. Because it's very easy to look at your 20s and feel like, I can't believe I did all of those things. But maybe the more useful question is, what did that version of me actually need? And I think the book gradually moves towards that kind of understanding. That said, the conversational style can also become a weakness. There were definitely sections in the book where I felt that the book was heavily relying on anecdotes. Some stories are heartbreaking heartbreaking and also funny that definitely stays with you. But others feel like stories that you might like to hear from a friend over dinner but doesn't necessarily need 20 pages about it. So for me, the writing was equally engaging and I was able to sit through some stories, but I definitely felt that we could have cut short some repetitive anecdotes that made up bulk of the book and didn't have a lasting impact on me. The thing I loved most about this book was how it made me think about the different ways we experience love as we grow up. Molly spends most of her 20s looking for attention in terms of romantic relationships, being wanted, being chosen, being enough. And I think this is something that a lot of women will recognize. Sometimes we are not even heartbroken about the person, but about the fact that we are rejected and we do not feel enough because of it. And what I found most interesting was the most important relationship in the book is not a romantic one. It is a friendship that Dolly has with her friend Fali. Dolly reserves this friendship the same kind of emotional complexity we usually gives romantic relationship. Intimacy, jealousy, dependence, conflict, deep love, and eventually the possibility of losing someone you think would be in your life for. I really appreciated it because looking back, I've also felt that some friendships can shape your life the same way a romantic relationship can, and yet we rarely talk about the endings with the same weight. And I also love that the book doesn't present growing up as this linear process where you make mistakes, learn a lesson, and suddenly become an adult. Dolly looks at her younger self with a certain sense of embarrassment but also affection. There is compassion for her younger self, and that is one of the most beautiful parts of the book for me. Because when you yourself look back at your own life, you do not see the person you were, you see them with everything you know now. Something that looked like the end of the world at 23 can look completely different at 32. And maybe growing up doesn't mean forgetting about those mistakes and never making them again. It is about understanding the kind of person that you were and how you make better choices as you grow up and learn from them. Slowly, eventually, but you do. What I did not like about the book. Now, I don't want this review to become one of those reviews where I only talk about the good parts and do not give a constructive criticism for the memoir, because I am not that kind of person. And there is room for improvement in any book, as is the case with this book. My biggest issue with this book was the length and the repetition. There are certain ideas that the book establishes quite early, especially around dating, partying, validation, friendships, and relationships. And then it continues circling back to it. And because this is a memoir, not a carefully curated, structured novel, some of it is inevitable. But I definitely had moments where I was wondering, okay, I understand what you're trying to tell me. I also feel that some of the dating stories were more entertaining than insightful. They are fun to read, but I did not necessarily feel like they added a strong argument to the larger theme of the book. And that is where I feel the memoir could have been tighter. My other hesitation is that this book is very carefully curated around Dolly's experiences. The cultural setting, the dating, the partying, all of it is very particular to her life and generation. So while the emotional themes are quite universal, particular experiences might not resonate with everyone. And I feel that is worth knowing before you pick up the book. I did not feel that this is a book where you walk away with profound life lessons about love. It is much more observational than that. You're basically watching someone else make sense of her own life. And whether or not that works for you depends on how much you enjoy this memoir and how much you are able to relate to it. I really like the parts where she talks about London, and as someone who lived in London for 2 years and have had experiences quite solo, I thoroughly enjoyed reading about them and going back into that nostalgia of living through those streets and those experiences, not exactly, but just being a person who enjoys city life a lot. It did make me time travel and it did make me reminiscence all those memories. So that was a really fun part of the book for me. Overall, my final verdict, I'm going to give this book 3.5 out of 5 stars. The reason where I really wanted the book to be a little more edited and little more focused, but I definitely get the hype why some people would enjoy and love this book, because underneath all these stories of partying and growing up, there is an underlying theme that makes us wonder. We spend so much of our lives waiting to be chosen romantically that we forget to pay attention to the people who have already chosen us. And I really think that is beautiful. Your friendships are love, your family is love. The person who remembers who you were before you became who you are now is also love. And even learning to have compassion compassion for a younger self is also a form of self-love. So would I recommend Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alderton? Definitely yes. Especially if you are in your 20s navigating relationships and friendships, or you are at a stage in your life where you are looking at your younger self and trying to make sense of all the experiences that you lived through her. Just don't pick it up as a guidebook to romantic love. I personally feel the book's real message is quite the opposite. You do not need one person to give your life meaning. You might already be surrounded by more love than you ever realize. This is my honest opinion of the book. And now I want to know about your opinion of the book. If you have already read it or you're planning to read it, do let me know in the comment section below. What are your thoughts and opinions about this very popular memoir? If you like this video, please like it, share it with your friends and family. And if you are enjoying these book reviews and book related videos on this channel, consider subscribing to the channel. I make book related videos here. I talk about books at length. It has been a long standing passion for me to talk about books, to read a lot of books, and just be able to make something of a passion I so dearly hold as love, right? I so dearly hold close to my heart. That is all. I will take a leave for today. I will see you guys next time. Until then, happy reading.